He made a covenant with Noah, keeps the covenant he made a covenant with. Here is this truth: God creates the covenant. God that, dear brothers, and we well supporting, I think that the reality is to his God covenant, to the God of the covenant, to the God who creates the covenant, accepting and thanking and enjoying. Harry did the right thing, did the right thing. Christ, I think that we are Baptists ultimately in his Son Jesus, man, in different ways throughout. God who entered into a covenant with, encouraged, speaking about the reality of our creating the testament and keeping the testament. I am very like me and you creation are subordinate. He is God, and the earth and everything that is on him is God, to whom we covenant. We understand that God created the heavens. Understanding the nature and essence of the Mosaic, we need to understand all the applications of this covenant is extremely important for us to understand God. God creates and keeps the covenant benefit in the First Testament. Very simple. Simply under this third point, the benefit of Moses, that I want to share time. There are 4 specific thoughts that are given to us today in this covenant in the history of redemption and the blessings. We move on to the goal of the Mosaic grace in his Son. We will see this when covenant of salvation is founded by we reach Christ only in him, Messiah, but it will not be until God revealed in the end in his Son's blessing of the proton salvation with the promise of grace of the seed of the woman, sick, an organization of the covenant. We see God, this is one covenant, and in all this in covenant of works before the covenant of grace, and less than span greater than of God in the story of the redemption of Moses, part of the greater story of the greater work. Then we look at it differently as Mosaic covenant, and it is a definities. I am convinced this is indeed will be Presbyterians to us, but if you believe if application, if you believe this, you of grace and several different applications. Grace and God has one covenant. We say that this is part of God. There are those of faith, for example, was it a covenant or a covenant, argue on different topics. But they are different debates among theologians. They all read theology on this topic. There a rejudgment will befall them. Interestingly, when with other side of the coin is God's curse, and that if you are not faithful, then see by the end of the book he will sigh enjoy its blessings, but weep so they can content whether for Israel was faithful and true, as other nations were not set apart. Israel, they are set apart for God's purposes. This true presence of God is found in to worship God in Israel. We see as other nations will not be set apart. God's glorious purposes they will be set apart. Become hereby such an instrument for sinners, and Israel was chosen in order the creation of the world to save. Next we will look at the promise according to less than span greater than set apart for his purposes, for his will be his holy people. That isn't it is very clear because of this that they, as long as they remain faithful to him, promises them the continued status of a people, to them the inheritance of the earth through Abraham. He also for the purpose of redemption in the world, and having promised nations he chose them for his glory, and from other that he was pleased to choose Israel. Simply loved them, he chose them because loved them with his eternal love. He had potential, but because they were bigger or greater, not because they were better, not because God chose a people from all the nations of the earth. Treasure, if they are faithful to his cause, they will be his, that they will be his precious treasure. God promises here to Israel people to build on the promise that he received glory. Notice he further continues, they will glorify him and will live for his God and not his people. He will bless them to his word. God promises that he will be their Israel's faithfulness to God and their obedience, said in connection with the confirmation to the Lord your God, as he has own people as he saith nations which he created in Honorim, and that he will place you above Alu if you keep all the commandments the Lord has promised you today, that you will be God's covenant. We find them in verse 18, devotion and obedience to him, emphasizing his loyalty to him when he concluded with them David's duty of loyalty to God. Consequences. Therefore, they have, however, if it is not so, then there will better blessings of the land that God gives you will enjoy alto him, and he says, when you do so, show this faithfulness through obedience, affirm their loyalty to God and land on the basis of the promise the promise. Now when they enter this through Abraham, you have already received it. Through Abraham you have already received it, your God. You have an inheritance in the land. To Israel you will be my people, and I will, means by which they can will give to man, their communication with him and satisfaction regarding the benefits that life. I will read this again. Will bring joy to Thethos, means like this, which will give a person their communication with him and satisfaction regarding those benefits. The Declaration of God's Sovereign 1689. He writes about the covenant at Israeligian Hus Ms is one of the authors of Aurobi. His voice, walk in his ways, keep his commandments with all your soul, to devote yourself to God so, and make every effort with all your heart. Affirm Uriah. We find very clearly God's people about him, how we react to his word, but relationship with God, how we talk careless, so reckless in our today. The modern church is so a seriously extremely tragic accusation relationship with God. Treat this mindlessly. We are talking now about do it with all your heart, no need to approach. He tells him, therefore be careful submission or obedience to this law and fidelity of dedication to God. The second part after the law. The first statement is confirmation, practice of what God has commanded. Obedience are greater than an we will do what he says. Confirmation of God our God, and we are his people. Covenant faithfulness lies in Theto him. We see that the first part of this dedicated we confirm our commitment, and his law we will fulfill what he says. God is the one who revealed himself to us, who gave us confirmation of faithfulness to God, of devotion. Israelis, the first duty of loyalty under the covenant in must do as your people, and this said, we will do what you said, will so confirmed their loyalty to him people. And in the light of this revelation they that Jehovah is our God, and we will be his, affirmed first of all and most of all. See that the previous generation also 19th chapter through the 4th, where there is nothing new here forden in the previous generation with using the covenant with Israel. What has already been Israel is part of their part of God's plan. Voice in his ways and keep his decree and yours, God, and that you will walk. You told the Lord today that he will be with all your heart and with all your soul. Had I taught you to observe and fulfill theme, observe, that is, in the light of all that laws you must carry out these decree and Israel regarding the Torah of the law of God, in the light of all that I have explained to you. 17th on this day Moses says, we see it in verses 16 and obligation of covenant loyalty in Israel. Things are first of all we see promised land. Here are two key Israel, the truth about their life before him in reveals the life of Israel in the Mosaic covenant. God's further explanation of his purposes in God's further explanation of his purposes. Inc. uses Isabel documents Juntado test para Legendas Legenda Russo B. 461 TXTWHO instructed they did not walk in him in all generations. They are not like Nehemiah. Preservation of God's truth and worship, a testimony of the greatness of God. 4 was to protect and preserve as danger as the meaning for profit. These sacrificed was necessary to stick together